Okay, looks like we have video. Hopefully, we have audio, and we will get this live stream going here. Welcome to the Training Cafe, friends. Eric Hörst here, back with another episode. Try to do this 1 or 2 Mondays every month where we meet together. If you're a coffee drinker like I am, bring some coffee. This is the Training Cafe, and we'll sip coffee together. We'll talk training and climbing. I'll answer some of your questions, and so hopefully we can make this a regular meeting of climbing friends. Of course, I'm a veteran coach. I'm getting up there in the years. I've been climbing nearly 50 years and coaching for more than 3 decades. So I've worked with thousands of climbers, and I've seen pretty much everything under the sun. So that gives me a lot of wisdom to share, and also things that I've learned the hard way. Because as a climber and a hard training climber for many decades, I've made my share of mistakes. I'm a climbing researcher, so I really do seek to be evidence-based and blend the wisdom that comes from evidence-based approach to things, but also real life experience, which is incredibly important and powerful, especially in a complex sport like climbing, where each of us are different in terms of our genetics, our sports backgrounds, our injury histories, our training knowledge and capabilities, genetics. Obviously, there's just so many variables that cookie cutter training doesn't work. You might get by early on in the beginner stages with a bit of a cookie cutter program, but the more advanced you become, the more you need a program that is nuanced for you. And you can learn to be a very effective self-coach, given research and studies, and asking lots of questions of people smarter and wiser than you. And hopefully the Training Cafe can be a small piece of that puzzle. So in this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit, kind of as my main topic, how to support performance on consecutive days to make the best of your climbing. So you have a weekend trip somewhere. Uh, what is the best approach in coach's opinion? And then I'll get to answering your questions in just a bit. So if you're tuning in here to the cafe and you have a comment or a question, anything under the sun that's performance related, could be injury, it could be training, you name it. I'm happy to take my shot at answering it. And if I can't, I'll let you know I can't, and I'll try to refer you to somebody who can. So let's get on with it. And I just want to confirm that it looks like hopefully we are. My goal was to be streaming on Instagram this time around, and so hopefully we are, but maybe we're not. If anybody's watching on Instagram, maybe let me know. Let me just see here. Well, I can't get a quick answer to that question, so I don't want to get off on a tangent here. But I've been historically doing these on as a live stream on YouTube, on the Training for Climbing YouTube. Which, by the way, if you're not a subscriber, subscribe, ring the bell, because then you'll get notifications for future training cafes that I do. But also, I'm trying to get these on other platforms like the Training for Climbing Facebook page and the Training for Climbing Instagram. So hopefully we're making progress in getting these videos live on more platforms so that we can engage more people here. Okay, so let's get to the main topic, and then in 5 or 10 minutes when I'm done with this, I'll get to answering some of your training questions. So if you're like many people, myself, most of my life, I was a weekend warrior, training and working during the week, and then trying to climb my best on the weekends. For me, it was either local climbing in Pennsylvania, where I live, or it would be a weekend trip to the New River Gorge or the Red River Gorge or the Schwangunks or maybe New Hampshire if I really wanted to drive far. And then, of course, I would have some summer trips and, the spring break, fall break trips that were longer than that. But for most of my life, I was a weekend warrior, like I imagine many of you are. And so, kind of training with those weekend trips in mind, trying to kind of taper the training late in the week, get a couple days of deload so that you can arrive at your destination. For most people, it's Saturday morning, your first climbing, fresh. That is the goal. And then, what is the best approach once you're there? Well, first of all, if you've taken a couple of days off, like a Thursday and Friday of rest and recovery and maybe travel to your destination, day one, you need a little bit longer warm up. Coming off of 2 rest days, your body needs more of a warm up to get not only the synovial fluid and the joints lubricated, but also, in terms of the biochemistry of what's going on in your working muscles, to get the enzymes, the aerobic energy system spun up, to get that nervous system engaged and firing, get your recruitment up. You need to do a couple of warm-up routes. Ideally, you'll do some grip warm-up that's very specific on a flashboard or using the Peak 6 force gauge to kind of gradually warm up your crimp, your open hand, your different pocket grips. Do a little bit of mild stretching, but not a lot of stretching. Some massage is good, and some submaximal climbing to get a moderate pump, but not a deep flash pump. You don't want to do that. So day one, don't rush to your limit boulder, your limit project, because you'll get on there, you may get flash pumped, and without a proper warm up, you're not going to be able to utilize the aerobic energy system to the fullest. So you'll go anaerobic faster, you'll get pumped faster, and you can really potentially affect the cellular state. And, if you get really pumped and, that intercellular pH can drop quite low, and really shut down the anaerobic enzyme functionings. And you just often don't climb right the rest of the day if you get that vicious flash pump from getting on your project too soon and going too hard. So err on the side of a lot of warm up. Get out there, try to get on. I will typically do a 10, a 510, a 511, then get on maybe a 12A, and then finally get on my project. Maybe go bolt to bolt on the project to get a specific warm up and to re-memorize the sequences. So I might not get in my first project burn or efforts on the project until after noontime. So like kind of from 9 a.m. till noon, I'm just going through this long warm-up process. Now, if you're younger, you can probably go through it a bit faster. But again, I think it's good to err on the side of a more thorough warm-up on day one. Day two, after you've climbed a day, you've slept a night, and day two, you don't need as deep of a warm-up. A little bit, yes, but your enzymes are kind of still spun up from the day before, and the mitochondria have been already kind of those ATP factories have been turned on, and the production line of ATP has been blasting the previous day, and so things turn on more quickly. And so you probably discovered you don't need as much nor want as much warm up on day two. You want to kind of get to things more quickly. But in any case, back to day one. After that thorough warm up, put in quality efforts. What you don't want to do is empty the tank on day one. You don't want to just, hammer on the project. If it's a boulder and the first few moves are the hardest, you could potentially put in a lot of attempts with, 3 to 5 or even 10 minutes rest between attempts. But if you're on a sport route, you might put in 2 or 3 quality attempts or working goes, but to put in 4 or 5 or 6, especially if it's a longer, steeper route that's really physical, like here at the Red River Gorge, oftentimes 2 quality goes is about all you'll have in you, maybe 3. And I'll tell you, I know a lot of the pro climbers who are so well conditioned, and they could climb 513s all day long. They get on their hard projects, let's say a 14C or a 15A, and it's really too high quality goes is what you're going to get. So climbing is scalable. I don't climb 14 or 15, I'm projecting 13B or C. And so 13B or C is my 15A. And so in that way, we can relate, or maybe your project is 11B or 12A. If that's your limit project, you're going to be kind of in the same mode as that pro climber on their 515, where you can only give it a couple of quality goes. And if you do more than that, first of all, it ends up not being very productive. Now, again, if you're hanging a lot, bolt to bolt, yes, you could do 3 or 4 working goes on a route. But if you're making those all out red point efforts on the project, again, here at the red, those steeper routes, you're doing shaking, you're they tend to not be quick ascents. So if you fall high on your project, it could be a 10, 15, 20-minute effort, and then you fall, and then you got to come down and rest an hour, and then you do it again. But you can't do that endlessly. 2 to 3 times at the most is typical. And a key point here, day one, if you want to climb good day two, don't empty the tank on day one. I used to, when I was a younger climber, love climbing till dark. Now I only do that if I'm not even going out until like 1 in the afternoon. Then I might climb till dark. But if I'm getting a start at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., getting my warm up, getting on the project midday, I'm wrapping things up by 4 or 5 p.m. And looking to get a good meal with carbohydrate and protein. The sooner you can get something into your system when your day is done, carry a couple of protein bars, really high quality protein bars with you. And when you're done for the day, don't wait an hour or two to eat dinner. Eat that protein bar as you're hiking out from the boulders or crag to get your recovery started. And then eat a good, complete whole food meal with carbohydrate, protein, and some healthy fats an hour or two later, and that'll be good. And be careful what you drink. I mean, obviously, you need to rehydrate, so water is ideal. Uh, Beer, well, if you send your route, then maybe reward yourself. But if you didn't send, maybe you should hold off on the beer, because there's nothing beneficial that comes from drinking beer. I mean, I enjoy a beer at the end of the day, um, but it is counterproductive in terms of hydration and recovery. There's not much there nutritionally of value. And so if you really want to climb your best day two, avoid the alcohol. And again, reflecting on my experiences around pro climbers, while some of them drink no alcohol whatsoever, others, do it, um, at the right time. And so if they're going to go 2 days hard, they're probably not drinking 3 beers at the end of day one if they want to go out and climb hard day two. Uh, but maybe if they know they're taking a couple of rest days, at the end of day two, they might have a couple of adult beverages or a glass of wine. And, knowing that they have a couple of rest days to kind of get their body back to where it needs to be hydration wise, and, glycogen replenishment and such. So again, day one, don't empty the tank, and get a good meal and a good night's sleep to set you up for day two. And then day two, get an early start. You're probably driving home. If you're a weekend warrior, you might, like in my days climbing at the New River Gorge, for example, I would have to leave for home by 3 or 4 in the afternoon to make the 6-hour trek back to Pennsylvania. So I would try to get out again by 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and get good 6 hours of climbing in. Um, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, day two, you don't need quite the same warm up. You still need to do some mobility work. It's still good to do a warm up route, but you might be able to do a single warm up and then go back to your project if you think you have enough gas in the tank to maybe send it. Or what I really encourage climbers to do, especially intermediates that are kind of, between 510 and 513A, that's where the massive climbers are climbing, it seems, the weekend warriors. Just projecting one route 2 days in a row, I think, is not the best way to learn to become a better climber. You need to send routes. You need to get a lot of volume under your belt. You know, learning. Our playing field is infinite, and so to accumulate experience over months and years and decades, you want to climb a lot of routes and travel to a lot of areas, and that will make you a technically proficient and more efficient climber. You'll learn to problem solve faster. There's just so many benefits to climbing a lot of routes. So, what I would propose, and what I still do after all these years is, when I'm fresh on day one, I'll work on the limit project. Day two, oftentimes I do not go back to that limit project. I will instead dial things back, climb more for fun and for sending, which for me means I'm going to be picking routes, more 511C to 512C or D, where I can either on-site it, flash it, or second go the route. And in that case, I can maybe do 4, 5, 6 routes on day two and have a lot of fun, clip some chains, accumulate experience, check some routes off in the guidebook, uh, and and have a good time rather than the pressure of trying to send on day two. Again, everybody's different. You got to find out what formula works for you. But if you're so close to sending the rig, you might send it day two, and I would encourage you to go back to it and give it a go or two. But if it's a longer term project, like for me, my 13C or D project, I'm not going to send on day two. I'm going to need be totally fresh. I'm going to need a low gravity day with perfect conditions like what we have today, which is a rest day, a work day for me. And going to need the stars to kind of align to do my limit projects. And so that's not likely to happen on a day two. So why waste the energy? Let's go send some routes and have some fun on day two. So that's what I would recommend in most cases. The caveat on day two is be careful climbing hard routes in a fatigue state because that is when most injuries occur. You can be not fresh in terms of your lock off or your scapular stabilizer, maybe fatigued if you've been climbing a lot of steeper bouldery routes. You're not as sharp mentally, your foot could pop and you shock load a finger. I mean, a lot of things happen in a fatigue state that can not be good when it comes to finger injuries, a shoulder tweak, some other event. So as the accumulation grows, resist flogging yourself on a route or a boulder and dial things back and get on something a little easier, or just call it a day if you feel like if you're someone who is injury prone. And some climbers are just more injury prone than others for various reasons: genetic factors, nutritional factors, rest factors, previous sports injuries that come back to haunt you as a climber. uh, there's a lot of factors there. And when I am around or working with climbers that have a history of injury, I'm very vocal in saying you need to be careful climbing and training in a fatigue state. There's probably more risk than reward. So be careful. Okay, so there's my, well, actually, maybe 15-minute spiel or lecture from the old coach. And so now let's get to some questions. And I see a few typed in here. We'll get to these. And when we run out of questions, we'll wrap up the video. And again, if you have coffee, please, dear climber and coffee aficionado, sip with me. And climbing, coffee, training for climbing, talking amongst friends, what could be better? So let's make this a ritual. Okay, let's see here. Sam left a comment here, and it looks like he's viewing perhaps on YouTube. He says, I'm focusing on bouldering this season, planning to sport climb in the spring at the Red. So I'm trying to still get mileage in one day a week to keep my aerobic level. Is this a good strategy? Absolutely, that's a huge strategy. If you want to, route climb, especially at a place like the Red, which is very, very much an aerobic endurance endeavor, you need to train that aerobic energy system year round. You have to kind of channel your inner runner. Now, I'm not saying you run for training, though you could do some running. That would not be a bad thing for stroke volume and, your cardiovascular support system, which is what, definitely helps carry you on those long days as a route climber. But I'm speaking more to the aerobic energy system in your climbing muscles and, bouldering, doing boulders that typically take 10 seconds to at most a minute are primarily anaerobic. And the exercises that many climbers do and boulders do, whether it's hangboard training or weighted pull-up training or weight training, are very anaerobic. And so, you really need to seek out activities that are aerobic. And again, there's generalized aerobic, things like biking, swimming, and running, which for a climber don't translate perfectly, but what does translate is the good that it does for your circulatory system, specifically the heart and stroke volume. So doing some generalized aerobic activity year round, 2 or 3 days a week, is a smart thing, I believe. That speaks to conditioning. But in terms of the climbing specific aerobic energy system, it's submaximal climbing for volume. You might call it zone 2 climbing, where you get on routes that are nowhere near your limit, and therefore may not be all that gratifying to climb on, especially if you're in the gym, but you need to do it. Just kind of like a runner putting in their mileage, their zone 2 mileage. A climber that wants to climb routes, hard, steep, aerobic routes, like here at the Red River Gorge or many of the other sport areas that, you're not standing on your feet so much. You need a very powerful aerobic energy system. And you get that by climbing lots of mileage. And so doing that once or twice a week, trying to get a total aggregate climbing time of 30 to 60 minutes. And I know that's hard to do, but you can get on an auto belay at the gym and go up and down. You could climb with a friend and do doubles on routes in the gym where you lead a route, lower off, pull the rope, and lead it again, and then lower off, and then your partner does the same thing, and then you keep going back and forth and do that for a few hours. You'll climb a lot of mileage. You'll climb 500 to 1,000 feet in a few hours if you use that strategy. And as long as your route selection is well below your limit, they should all be routes you won't fall on. Generally, they should be at least one number grade below your limit. Typically, I think closer to 2 number grades is better. Like for me, if my limit is mid-range 13, when I'm climbing for mileage at the gym, I'm selecting routes between 11A and 12A. And, again, my limit is 13 BC. So you can see that's 1 to 2 number grades below that limit where I'm selecting routes to do a lot of mileage. And a mild to moderate pump is okay, but never should you get a blistering pump. Never should you be at the point of nearly falling or falling. If so, then you're likely going anaerobic severely, and therefore you're not targeting the aerobic energy system. And so, you're not seeking to be climbing hard. And again, many climbers, things will escalate because we want to do hard things. We love doing hard things. But when you're going to the gym to put in aerobic energy system 1 or 2 days a week, you have to be out of that mindset and be very, very disciplined. So hopefully that helps you out, Sam. Even though you're bouldering this fall, if you get that 1 or 2 sessions in a week this fall, this winter, where you are targeting the climbing specific aerobic energy system, that will have you in decent shape when you get to your Red River Gorge spring season climbing. Okay, let's see here. Next up is what should someone focus on to better transition from New River Gorge style to Red River Gorge style? That is a great question. And actually, I was just talking to some climbers here yesterday at the crag about that exact same thing, because, the New River Gorge and the Red River Gorge, they're about 3.5 hours apart. They're both sandstone areas. They have similar climate. but they couldn't be more different when it comes to the nature of the sandstone and the style of the climbing. And for those of you who haven't been to those two areas, the New River Gorge is very hard nuddle sandstone. It's literally as hard as granite. I know because I've drilled hundreds, probably thousands of bolts at the New River Gorge over the last 30 years. And that hard nuddle sandstone has lots of blank sections. It tends to have a lot of long reaches between small holds. It's very bouldery as a style. You get on a 13A, you are going to do a V6 boulder in all likelihood. Uh, Red River Gorge, however, the sandstone is very soft and it has tons of pockets and edges, and oftentimes on routes, there's so much there to choose from that it can be kind of confusing. And with experience, you learn which types of holds to grab and how to grab them. But at first can be a little confusing. But there's rarely a reach issue. There's always intermediates for bumping hands and bumping feet. And it tends to be more a resistance climbing area. So again, the New River Gorge is often boulder problem rest, boulder problem rest, boulder problem rest. And so it is more anaerobic. You need aerobic conditioning because that's what that drives recovery at the rests, but it's not as much of a premium as it is here at the Red. You get on a steep overhanging route for 100 feet that takes 10 to 20 minutes to climb. Probably 85 or 90% of the ATP that is being split to power your climbing is being generated through the aerobic energy system, with only maybe 10 or 15% coming from the anaerobic system. So a strong anaerobic climber here, a boulderer, doesn't necessarily do well. They often feel really strong for the first one or two bolts. Then by bolt 3 or 4, they're hanging pumped out. And, remarking how hard 12A feels. They might boulder V9 or V10, but they are hanging on 12A. Well, that's because they have a very strong anaerobic system from all their bouldering. And they're good at doing hard moves, but to connect lots of moderate moves together, like 12A at the Red, typically, 12A at the Red might not have a move over V3, but it's got a lot of V1, V2, V3 routes or moves on the route. And uh, therefore, you need to have a steady stream of ATP coming to power that. And it's the aerobic energy system that gives you that steady stream. And so aerobically fit climbers here, like myself, can climb pretty hard without having to do hard individual moves and boulders. So again, they're very, very different. If you're training for New River Gorge, I think you'd want to be doing like limit bouldering once or twice a week. Whereas if you're climbing at the Red, you might never do limit bouldering. And I think it would be good to do some, but I'm saying a lot of Red River Gorge style climbers are just about mileage, doing a little bit of hangboard training to kind of maintain peak finger force. But you don't need to necessarily get stronger and boulder harder to go up the next grade. Oftentimes you need to be more efficient and you need to have more aerobic capacity. And you do that by climbing for mileage, and also doing some power endurance training. But you get on the routes. A limit route will be very power endurance-y. And so you don't necessarily need to do a lot of that type of thing in the gym because you're going to get it on your weekend trips. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I wanted to really highlight the differences between areas. And you could be a Colorado climber or a California climber, European climber, and you can probably think of areas like what I just described. One area where the routes are very bouldery and anaerobic in nature, like the Frankenura, let's say. And then other areas where the routes might be more resistance in nature, perhaps you might use Seus, where the routes are longer and more endurance focused. Seus would require more aerobic conditioning, climbing specific aerobic conditioning than the Frankenura, where you're climbing very bouldery, often shorter routes. Okay, the sun is really getting brutal here on me. Trying to duck in the shade here a little bit. Okay, let's see here, Joe. Best beta memorization strategies for quick ascents at the Red River Gorge. Ah, that's something I know a lot about. Um, some of my friends call me the king of second going, and I guess that could be a compliment or it could be a put down, depending on the perspective. But I have a knack for getting on routes that are pretty hard for me, 12C, 12D, 13A, and doing them second go. And that's because, well, first of all, I've been climbing for decades. So I've, just climbed so many routes, who knows how many, tens of thousands of routes, that I really understand the playing field and what to look for. And so I'm a pretty good on site climber. I'm a pretty good second go climber, despite not being super strong anymore. Uh, but a lot of it is what you just mentioned there, which is techniques to remember moves. Now, of course, climbers, boulders, we often will put ticks on critical holds or even goalpost a hold. If there's a horizontal with just one sweet spot, you're putting two ticks where people call them goalposts to know where to, if you have to dead point and hit a specific spot, the goalpost is better than a single tick. So that's a tool you could use on the crux, but you can't do that on every hold up the route. That is ugly. It's an eyesore. And do brush your ticks when you're done because they might not be the right ticks for somebody else. So use that technique cautiously. But a big one for me is uh, taking a mental snapshot of critical holds and complex holds. Sometimes a hold is just dead obvious when you see it and when you get there how you're going to grab it. Uh, and you know other areas, pocketed areas, there might be a thumb catch. You might need to squeeze with a couple of fingers. Sometimes you split your fingers. I mean, there can be very tricky ways to grab holds that you don't always want to be feeling around and taking the time and pumping out to find out how to grab it. So really looking at the hold closely when you're on a take, when you're hanging, seeing how your hand fits in it, kind of feeling what your thumb, I mean, a lot of climbing areas like the Red River Gorge or limestone climbing, your thumb should always be doing something. It shouldn't be just hanging out. So how can you use your thumb to add pinch strength to a grip, which actually allows you to unload your finger flexors a little bit and conserve energy. So take mental snapshots, like you're taking a picture with your brain, and capturing that shot, because you work a whole route. um, you have kind of a low resolution movie in your head of yourself climbing the route, remembering the big body positions and where the route goes and maybe the clipping or rest positions. But when it gets down to subtleties like a foothold or a handhold and how you place your foot and how you place your hand, that data is often missing from that mental movie that you're making as you work the route the first one or two times. And so that's where, when you're doing that working, if you examine the holds closely, use a tick mark here or there to help get you onto the hold quickly and properly. And having that mental snapshot is powerful for when you go up on your second go and getting the hold right and getting it quickly. Same thing with the feet. And by the way, feet, I often will do a little dot of chalk. If there's a critical foot, I have bad vision at 6 feet. And so oftentimes in poorly lit shaded routes, I can't see the feet very well. So I can look for that dot of chalk and get my foot on the right hold quickly. And then finally, on those hardest moves, try to discover and think about what I call the feel beta. Uh, and that is what it feels like to do the crux move. A lot of routes, if there's a weird body position with some, body English of some kind, it could be a drop knee, it could be an outside edge foot, it could be a little bit of a swing, semi-dynamic move. It could be a very balancing move on a vertical face. Those types of moves that are very dicey, like on red point, I could just fall off of this because it's so weird. You need to know what it feels like to be in the right position to do the move, successfully. Because if you get there and you know the holds, you know the hand and the foot holds, but you don't know the body position and the feel of the body position and making the move, you're probably not going to do it, or you're going to over grip and you're going to slow down, rather than when you get to those hard moves, you want to actually execute and get through them quickly, because every second the clock is ticking that you're hanging on those small holds or standing on those dicey feet. So to know the feel beta, you can grab the hold, set the feet, and boom, shift your body and feel the sensations. It's called proprioception. Feel the sensations through your torso or your knees of your body twisting back to that position that you identified on the previous go. That's how you use feel beta to really nail down a crux move. And it's one of my secret tools to being, really good at second going routes. Is on that first go, I not only figure out the holds, but I figure out the feel beta. So there's some stuff to work on. You really need to be engaged and thoughtful. And don't rush through your first go. My first goes, if I know it's a hard route, but I can maybe second go it, I'll, at the crux, climb the crux 3 times, climb it, lower down, climb it, lower down, and really kind of get the reps. Even though it's only one go up the route, I'll practice the crux of the route, maybe a 5 or 10-foot section 3 times. I always figure if I can do it 3 times out of a hang, I have a really good chance of doing it on point. And then I also finish the anchor run, or I practice the anchor run, because the last thing you want to do is punt going to the chains. So I make sure, especially if it's hard up there, I make sure I know the ending and have it kind of dialed in by doing it 2 or 3 times on that first go, that first tie-in. Take a 45-minute to an hour rest and then go for the second go. So hopefully those tips help you out there. Okay, next question is, I have a 15-year-old youth that has been climbing for over a year, starting fingerboard now or wait? Very common question, the topic of fingerboard training and youth climbers. And, the very, very safe rule of thumb is no finger training for growing kids. But you know what? I think that is kind of a poor answer. And here's why. Those same kids are getting on boulders with small holds and trying them repeatedly. If they are a typical youth climber, they're doing V8 or V10 in the gym or perhaps outdoors. And in working those routes, they're trying them repeatedly. Maybe they have a kilter board and they're projecting a route and they try it 8 times in a row. How is that different from a fingerboard workout where you're doing 8 hangs in a row? So it's kind of foolish to say, well, don't hangboard, but yes, go do those hard boulders. The correct answer is proper coaching and guidance so that they can use the hangboard as a tool to get stronger. And also provide the same kind of guidance when it comes to their overall workouts and how many reps they can do. So it's often not the exercise, but the overuse of the exercise. I mean, that's why there's so many climbing injuries of people of all ages, is people just do too much of the most stressful things, whether it's hangboarding or campus boarding or limit bouldering. It's the dose that is the problem. And in small doses, youth climbers can do pretty much all of that: campus board, fingerboard, bouldering. Again, in the proper dosing, with the proper guidance, with the proper warm up. And again, I'm not saying all youth climbers should be doing those things. Absolutely not. Because every youth climber is unique, like a snowflake. And so it would be incorrect to take a team approach and say, everybody go do this. You could do that with some basic rudimentary things, like mobility work, or if you're doing a weight training session, or doing some generalized aerobic training, you could take a group approach to it. But when it gets down to the most rigorous climbing specific exercises and climbing activities, you need to prescribe for the youth climber what is right. And so for a 15-year-old, I don't think there's anything that's off limits uh, as a starting point, though we need to consider that youth climber, like, do they have any history of injuries? If it's a 15-year-old, you don't say if it's a boy or a girl, but if it's a 15-year-old female climber, she's likely done growing. Uh, and that kind of opens the door to doing more rigorous things. 15-year-old boys are often in their growth spurt, which is the most dangerous time, the most prone to break a growth plate here in this middle joint. It's most commonly the longest finger where the pain reveals first as the condition is kind of ramping up. And if you heed that warning and dial back the training, you can often work through those issues without stopping climbing and without a severe injury. But if a youth climber climbs through growth plate pain, attempts to, they will likely get injured, and that could be crippling. In the worst case, it could take them out of climbing for several months in a more common case scenario. And so with that 15-year-old, you just need to kind of consider everything, all the data you have on them in terms of history and growth. If they're done growing, that again opens up the door to doing more things like campus training and limit bouldering and fingerboard training and such. But if they're in their growth spurt, that's actually when you want to reduce those finger intensive exercises and try to get through the growth spurt years. The kids that grow the fastest, I have two sons. One had a growth spurt where he grew literally a foot in 2 years. And he had much more pain in his knuckles, and we had to really almost remove him from hard finger training. The other kid never grew more than 3 inches or so, I guess, in a year. So the growth was more gradual over a longer time, and he never had any issues. So it's the fastest growing youths that are most prone to this type of injury. Okay, enough said there. Let's move on to the next question. From Derek Childers, Red River Gorge climber, strong one at that. He says, I'm wondering if you have a good strategy to build stamina. I can give projects one good go every weekend, but my second and third go are just very powered down and never great. Yeah, so what he's speaking to there, that ability to give, more than one quality effort on a route, can be a number of things. And Derek, I would have to kind of do some testing and to really kind of get to the bottom of it with you. And I need to know more about what your current training practices are, because if you've been training the same way, let's say for the past 2 years, but you're not getting any better at giving a route a second go, that tells me your training is not good, or it's not optimal. And so that's something we should talk about if I run into you here at the Red in the next few weeks. But for the listeners here, the common scenario of being able to give a project route one good go, but a second and third go, the tank is empty. It could be a couple of things. If it's more of a steeper area, like the Red River Gorge, where the efforts on a route are commonly 10, 20, even 30 minutes that you're on the rope. As I mentioned earlier, that is, it's primarily the aerobic energy system that's doing the work. And so aerobic conditioning is critical for performing your best, not only on the first go, but on the second and the third and the fourth go. There's also something to be said about your anaerobic reserve. The anaerobic reserve, unlike your aerobic energy system, the anaerobic reserve is finite. It's a tank that is small and limited. And once you blow through that, you're not the same the rest of the day. Runners talk about hitting the wall. In marathoning, it's often at around 18 miles. Well, when you're running, you're using all of your energy systems. The aerobic energy system is cranking out ATP to its limit, and the anaerobic system is also cranking out ATP. They're contributing together. And that's how it is, in fact, in climbing. They're both contributing pretty much all the time. It's just which one is dominating. In bouldering, the anaerobic system dominates. In route climbing, the aerobic energy system dominates. But they're both contributing all the time. When you're on a route, a long route, and it has boulder problems, it has harder sections that push you into that anaerobic zone. If that is what is if that's what you're not able to do on the second day, is not able to persevere through multiple boulders on the second go of a longer route, then maybe it's actually the anaerobic system that's holding you back. That reserve could be expanded, or maybe you overtrained during the week. If you train hard on Wednesday and Thursday, you may, whether you know it or not, be carrying over fatigue on Saturday, on that one day you get to the crag, and therefore you're not able to perform at your best. You think you're 100%, but you're not. And so if you are cramming in your training during the week, hoping that it's going to get you up your route on Saturday, if you're training hard on Wednesday and Thursday, thinking that's going to help you on Saturday, you're actually probably wrong. Wednesday could go either way. You could go pretty hard, but Thursday needs to be a really truncated session for most climbers to get complete recovery by a weekend. So again, it's not the easiest question to give a personalized answer to, because there are several factors that could come to play. Even your eating habits at the crag can come into how well you perform on a second, third, fourth go as you get later in the day, later in your climbing day. You obviously need to trickle some carbohydrate into your system. Not a big meal, but you need to have some exogenous carbohydrate into your system. And those sports drinks made for runners and football players like Gatorade and Powerade aren't the best, because they can give you spikes of sugar and crashes and really mess up your energy levels throughout the day. But it's better to eat something that has a slower, steadier release of glucose into your system, like perhaps a banana or a protein bar. But that's too much of a tangent. I don't want to go down that road. Okay, it looks like I have pretty much navigated through all the questions that I can see here on the YouTube interface. I don't know if we ever successfully made it onto Instagram or not streaming, so I can't see accurately whether there's any questions. Just let me look here. It does look like, as best as I can tell, we made it onto Instagram, but I can't see any questions from Instagram, I'm sorry to say. I'm still kind of new at the attempted efforts to stream on Instagram. I've been doing this for a few years via YouTube, so I'm most comfortable with that setting. So I guess it's time. We're about 48 minutes into this episode of the Training Cafe. Thank you so much to everyone who joined me. If you enjoy this dialogue, I would invite you to follow the Training for Climbing YouTube channel, Instagram page, Facebook page, just so you'll get notice of when I'm going to do these in the future, once or twice a month. And also do visit trainingforclimbing.com. It's a great free resource. There's a search bar there. You can type in any topic or term and kind of reveal an archive of articles I've written over the last 20 years. I've got hundreds of podcasts and articles that you could peruse to really glean useful information that helps you become a better self-coach, which I think should be the goal of all long-term climbers. If you're just into a sport for a few years or to dabble in a sport, it helps to have a coach to help point you the way. But if you're in a sport for 10, 20, 30 years, you need to be able to self-coach and diagnose. Tiger Woods needs a golf coach, but he can also, on the course, diagnose for himself when the swing's not working or when he's not performing well, because he's been a student of the game for so long. And so that's what I think every serious climber that's in it for the long haul should seek to do, is become well-informed and to spin up ultimately as a self-coach that can really carry you over the long term and enable you year over year to train a little smarter and climb a little harder. And so that's the goal with everything I do, is to try to help you move in that direction. Final comment is, my sports nutrition company. It's a climbing nutrition company in reality, because that's our focus, my focus. PhysiVantage.com. I wish you would check it out. I'm a food first, advocate of eating a sound whole food diet, trying to remove from the diet the terrible things that are counterproductive, but also using sports nutrition to kind of fill in some of the missing pieces. A lot of vitamins and minerals are deficient in the typical diet. Even in a well-designed diet, there can be deficiencies. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E. You need vitamin C every day, and if you're not eating fruit, you're not getting it because your body can't make vitamin C. And then there's a myriad of trace minerals that play a role in your hormone production. There's a lot of talk about low testosterone levels these days, and some of that is environmental in terms of things that are in our food and water that we're not aware of that are adversely affecting the human being, but also a lot of trace minerals play vital roles in hormone production. And so that is where a well-designed, evidence-based, clinically dosed supplement can come in helpful and really be a difference maker. And so I would encourage you to check out PhysiVantage.com. In terms of those trace minerals I talked about for hormone support, we have a supplement called Vitalium. It's probably the only multivitamin you would need to take, one a day, two a day, and that would get you a relevant, effective dose of those trace minerals that are largely depleted in the soils and therefore largely missing or only in low amounts in even the most healthful diet. And we make a variety of protein powders, which are premium grade and delicious tasting. Our weapons grade whey protein, our Powerplex plant protein, and then our supercharged collagen protein, which has the amino acid profile ideal for supporting connective tissues, joint health, tendon aches and pains. And there's a lot of clinical evidence supporting this type of product in the diet of a hard training athlete to help them recover connective tissues, that are stressed so much in a activity like climbing. So in any case, if you want to go to PhysiVantage.com, check it out. And if you place a purchase, you can use the code SEND15, SEND15, and you'll get 15% off any full price nutrition at PhysiVantage.com. And I guess with that, I'll wrap things up. And I appreciate everybody who asked questions or left comments during this live stream, and everybody who tuned in. I hope you have some good climbing plans set here for the coming weeks, because it is Rocktober. It is, for many locations in the mid-latitudes, the best climbing conditions of the year. So it's time to execute and make it happen. And hopefully the old climbing coach can do so as well. So wish me luck. Until next time, be safe, be strong, climb on.